You know that person who keeps pulling away every time you get close, the one who disappears, leaves your messages unanswered, and makes you question your worth. You try to understand them, fix things, chase clarity, but nothing works. What if I told you the most powerful response isn't chasing them? It's silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any text ever could. In this video, I'll show you how that silent closure can completely shift the power dynamic, and why it's the one thing that makes even the most avoidant person realize what they've lost. Stay with me till the end. Let's be honest, dealing with an avoidant person can leave you feeling completely drained. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. No matter how tightly you hold on, it keeps slipping away. One minute they're warm and present, the next they're gone, leaving you confused, anxious, and questioning what you did wrong. You replay every word, every text, every moment together, trying to find the turning point, that invisible line where closeness became too much for them to handle. And that confusion, it's exhausting. Because you're not asking for too much, you're just asking for consistency, communication, honesty, the very things that build emotional safety. But with an avoidant person, those things often feel impossible. They crave connection, yet they fear it. They want love, but the moment it gets too real, they retreat. And you're left holding all the emotional weight, wondering why the love you gave so freely suddenly feels like a burden to them. It's easy to take it personally, to think, if I were enough, they wouldn't have left. But I want you to understand something powerful. Their avoidance isn't a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their fear. Avoidant people have learned, often from childhood, that closeness equals danger. Intimacy feels like losing control, and control is their safety net. So, when emotions get intense, their instinct isn't to lean in, it's to pull away. And here's the trap so many fall into. You start chasing. You try to fix the distance. You send the long messages. You reach out again. You wait by your phone, hoping for that one sign they still care. But every time you do, you confirm their deepest belief, that love is suffocating, that closeness equals pressure. The harder you try to hold them, the faster they slip away. It's not that they don't care. It's that they don't know how to handle care. So instead of staying, they withdraw. And your natural empathy, the very thing that makes you beautiful, starts turning into anxiety. You start thinking you need to be less much, quieter, cooler, more patient. You start silencing yourself to keep their attention. But here's what you need to hear. Love should never make you shrink. If someone can only love you when you silence your needs, that's not love. That's survival. And you deserve more than that. When you're dealing with an avoidant person, emotional understanding doesn't mean excusing their behavior. It means seeing it clearly, because clarity is power. Once you understand that their distance isn't about you, you stop trying to fill the space they've created. You stop negotiating for crumbs of connection. You stop fighting for closure from someone who's terrified of closeness. And that's where your real strength begins, in silence. Not the kind of silence that's manipulative or cold, but the kind that says, I don't need to explain my worth to someone who's not ready to see it. Because the moment you stop chasing, something shifts, not just in them, but in you. You begin to reclaim your power. You start to realize that your peace is worth more than their inconsistency. And that realization, that's where silent closure begins. Let's talk about what silent closure really means, because most people misunderstand it. They think silence is about punishment, ignoring someone to make them feel guilty or to make them chase you. But that's not what this is about at all. Silent closure isn't a game. It's not manipulation. It's power, the quiet kind that comes from emotional maturity and self-respect. Silent closure means this. I'm no longer explaining to someone who already knows how I feel, but still chooses not to value it. It's the moment you stop chasing answers and start choosing peace. It's when you decide that even if they never apologize, never come back, never explain why they pulled away, you're still going to move forward. Because your healing can't depend on someone else's readiness. See? Avoidant people thrive on control. Not because they're evil, but because control protects them from emotional discomfort. When you keep reaching out, keep asking what went wrong, keep showing up to prove your love, you give them that control. They get to decide when, how, and if connection happens. And as long as they feel that power, they never have to confront what they're actually avoiding, intimacy. But the moment you go silent, genuinely silent, the dynamic shifts completely. Suddenly, the avoidant doesn't have your energy to feed off anymore. There's no reassurance waiting for them. There's no emotional safety net. They're left alone with the silence they created. At first, they may not even notice. They'll assume you'll text again. You always have before. They'll tell themselves, hey, she's just giving me space, or she'll reach out eventually. But as days turn into weeks and your silence holds, something uncomfortable starts to happen. They feel the absence. And for an avoidant, absence is louder than words. Because for the first time, they can't escape their own thoughts. They can't distract themselves with your energy. They can't run from the emotional mirror you used to hold up for them. They start to realize that your silence isn't anger, it's acceptance. And acceptance is terrifying to someone who's used to being chased. That's when silent closure starts to work its quiet magic. It forces them to confront reality, not because you demanded it, but because your calm detachment reveals something they weren't ready to face. They lost access to your heart, and you didn't beg them to stay. Now, this doesn't mean every avoidant person suddenly transforms and comes running back apologizing. Some don't. But what does happen is that the balance of emotional power resets. You reclaim your energy, your focus, your dignity. You stop waiting for their breadcrumb of attention and start nourishing yourself again. Silent closure is a love letter to your own peace. It's saying, I don't need your explanation to find my closure. It's choosing to walk away, not because you don't care, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop bleeding for someone who only shows up halfway. And that's what changes everything, because when you detach from someone emotionally, you force them to experience the consequences of their behavior. The avoidant pattern only works when there's someone to absorb it. When you step back, that system collapses. The silence becomes their mirror for. They start to feel what you felt: uncertainty, disconnection, emptiness. And that's when the awakening begins. It's not about revenge, it's about reality. They finally get to feel what it's like to miss someone who truly brought peace and presence into their life. And that realization doesn't fade easily. You see, the avoidant type craves closeness just as much as anyone else, but they're terrified of dependence. Your silence breaks the cycle because it forces them to see that independence isn't about running away. It's about choosing wisely. And when you stop chasing, you show them something they've rarely seen, someone who loves deeply, but will not beg. And maybe that's the first time they start questioning their own behavior. Save is though trying. See, why didn't she fight for me this time? Why does it feel so different? That discomfort is the beginning of their growth. Not because you said the perfect thing, but because you finally said nothing at all. That's the paradox of silent closure. The less you do, the more powerful it becomes. Ha 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 ha. It's not about slamming the door. It's about gently closing it and walking away with grace. It's leaving the emotional space clear enough for them to finally hear their own echo. And when they do, they'll remember your calm. They'll remember how you showed love without pressure. They'll remember that you didn't chase, you didn't compete, and you didn't play games. You simply valued yourself enough to let go. That's the kind of strength people never forget. Even if they don't come back, they feel the difference. It's not a manipulation. It's your peace speaking for you. And if they ever do return, it won't be because you begged them to change. It'll be because your silence reminded them what a healthy love actually feels like. So, silent closure isn't about getting them to beg for another chance. It's about giving yourself the closure they were never capable of giving you, and in doing that, you become the one thing every avoidant secretly craves but rarely finds: someone who can love deeply and still walk away with strength. Here's something fascinating. Silence doesn't just make the avoidant notice your absence. It actually activates something deep inside them. Avoidant people live in a constant push-pull with connection. They want love, they crave intimacy, but the moment they feel it getting too real, they start to panic. That panic isn't about you, it's about their past. Somewhere along the way, love became linked to danger. Maybe they grew up in an environment where emotions were overwhelming or inconsistent. Maybe closeness felt like losing control. So as adults, they protect themselves by keeping love at arm's length. When you were chasing, reaching out, or trying to fix things, you unknowingly kept them in their comfort zone. They didn't have to risk anything emotionally. They knew you'd always be there. They could keep running, and you'd keep catching up. That's how the avoidant dynamic stays alive, through your effort. But the moment you go silent, the pattern breaks. For the first time, they don't have the reassurance that you're still waiting. That silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates emotional tension. It's the same tension you've been feeling all along, only now they feel it too. See, avoidant people fear being consumed by love, but they also fear being forgotten. They want space, but they want to know you'll still be there when they're ready. When your silence denies them that safety net, their subconscious alarm goes off. Wait, what happened? Where did she go? Did she stop caring? That internal conflict starts to eat at them. Because here's the truth. Even though avoidant people seem detached, they do get attached. They just don't know how to process attachment in a healthy way. When you stop providing emotional reassurance, it triggers the same fear of loss that they've been trying to avoid. It's ironic, isn't it? The very silence that once scared you now scares them. Your stillness, your absence, it forces them to face what they've been avoiding all along. Emotional vulnerability. They start replaying moments in their head. Your kindness, your patience, your warmth. And because there's no longer any noise, your silence amplifies those memories. That's why silence is so powerful. It doesn't attack their ego. It awakens their awareness. They realize you weren't chasing them out of weakness. You were offering love out of strength. And when that love suddenly goes quiet, they start to feel the emotional gap they created. This is where the psychology becomes clear. The avoidant's biggest fear isn't losing control. It's losing connection. They've spent their lives trying to protect themselves from being hurt, but your silence shows them what real loss feels like. Not the loss of control, but the loss of someone who genuinely cared. And that realization cuts deeper than any argument, any confrontation, any long message could. Habu. Because silence doesn't need to convince, it simply shows. That's why avoidant people often come back after a period of silence. It's not always immediate. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes months. But when they do, it's because your absence forced them to confront something within themselves, something they've been running from their whole lives. Now, this doesn't mean you wait around. Silence isn't a strategy to make them return. It's your path to peace. Yes. But the beauty is, when you choose peace, you naturally create the kind of energy that draws respect, and sometimes even love back toward you, because nothing speaks louder than someone who has finally stopped trying to prove their worth. There's always a moment, a quiet, almost invisible moment, when everything shifts. The avoidant person who once seemed so confident in walking away suddenly starts to feel the weight of what they've lost. It doesn't happen overnight, and it rarely happens with dramatic gestures. It begins subtly, in silence. At first, your silence feels like a relief to them. It gives them space. They convince themselves it's what they wanted. Finally, they think, I have my peace back. They fill their days with distractions, work, friends, social media, anything that keeps them from thinking too deeply. They tell themselves you were just too emotional, too demanding, too intense. It's easier for them to believe that story than to face the truth. They pushed away someone who only wanted to love them. But as days pass, something strange starts to happen. That silence that once felt like freedom begins to feel like emptiness. The messages that used to pop up on their phone are gone. The reassurance they once took for granted has vanished. There's no check-in, no hey, how are you? There's just space, and space, for an avoidant, is both comforting and terrifying. That's when the turning point begins. See, the human mind is wired to value what it loses. As long as you were chasing, they didn't have to value your presence. It was guaranteed. But the moment you stopped, your energy became scarce, and scarcity makes people pay attention. The avoidant starts to notice the difference. Not in what you're doing, but in what you've stopped doing. They scroll through old texts. They replay moments where you made them feel safe, where you made them laugh, where you showed up when no one else did. And in that stillness, they begin to understand something that's both painful and eye-opening. You weren't asking for too much. They were giving too little. And that realization hits them differently this time. Because before, they were in control. Now the control is gone. You're no longer waiting for them to decide when or if connection happens. You've moved on, quietly, gracefully, without fanfare. That kind of peace is magnetic. It radiates strength. And for someone who's used to being chased, your detachment is both confusing and deeply attractive. Here's the truth. Most people underestimate the power of emotional calm. When you stop reacting, when you stop trying to force closure, when you let go with dignity, you send a message that no words could ever match. It says, I loved you, but I won't lose myself for you. That's the energy the avoidant can't forget, Because avoidant people often live in emotional extremes. They either feel smothered or completely disconnected, but your silence offers something in between. Balance. It's not revenge. It's not bitterness. It's acceptance. Sa. And acceptance is something they've spent their whole lives running from. So when they feel your absence, it's not just about missing you. You stop begging for love, and in doing so, you became whole again. That wholeness, that calm, that's what you must protect now. When they come back, the temptation will be to rush in to prove that you're still open, that you're still kind. But here's the truth. Kindness doesn't mean instant access. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the lesson. Strength means you can listen, stay open, but not lose yourself in their words. If they truly want another chance, they'll show it. Not through charm, not through promises, but through consistency. Watch their actions. Do they lean in emotionally this time? Do they communicate clearly? Do they take responsibility for their avoidance? Or do they brush it aside? Because avoidant people can only change when they face discomfort, and your boundaries create that discomfort. When you don't immediately fall back into old patterns, it forces them to meet you at a higher level. And that's the key. You don't rebuild the old relationship. You create a new one from strength, not fear. Now, maintaining your strength doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening it wisely. You can still be warm, you can still care, but you do it from a place of choice, not desperation. You no longer respond just because they text. You respond when it aligns with your peace. You no longer accept breadcrumbs. You wait for the full meal. And if they're not ready to meet you there, you're not angry. You're not bitter. You simply let them go again, but this time without pain. Because now you understand that your silence was never about losing them. It was about finding you. You've built emotional muscle. You've learned that love isn't proven through pursuit. It's proven through patience, through alignment, through effort on both sides. So when they come back, remember, you don't owe them your old version. The person they're reaching out to no longer exists. You've evolved. You've seen your own strength. You've learned that peace isn't found in getting someone back. It's found in not losing yourself when they return. Here's the truth. Real empowerment isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the calm confidence of someone who knows their worth and doesn't need validation to prove it. So if they say, I miss you, you don't need to say, I missed you too. You can simply say, I hope you've been well. If they say, can we talk? You don't need to rush. You can say, maybe. But let's take things slow because you're not reacting anymore. You're leading with intention. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes them finally see the difference. The same silence that once confused them now commands respect. The same distance that once scared you now draws them closer, because you've become someone who no longer chases love, but attracts it. And if they do earn a place back in your life, it won't be because you made yourself small to fit their comfort zone. It'll be because they grew to match your strength. But even if they don't, even if this is the final chapter, you've already won. Because you chose dignity over desperation. You chose peace over chaos. You chose yourself. That's the kind of love story that doesn't end in heartbreak. It ends in transformation. And when you look back months or years from now, you'll realize that their avoidance wasn't your rejection. It was your awakening. It pushed you to stop searching for closure in someone else and start finding it in your own silence. So when they come back, smile if you want to. Listen if you feel ready. But remember, the power is no longer in whether they stay or go, because that's what real empowerment sounds like. Quiet, grounded, unshakable peace. You know, sometimes we think the end of something means we've failed, that if they didn't stay, it must mean we weren't enough. But the truth is, some endings aren't punishment, they're protection. They're life's way of saying, you've learned what you needed to learn here. Now it's time to rise. You didn't lose someone who was ready. You released someone who wasn't. You didn't push them away. You simply stopped chasing where love refused to meet you halfway.